Good morning. Welcome to B Cube Sunday morning. A place. Now we know we're pretty far down on Trump's list, but at some point, we're. Oh, here I got the one I bought for Cliff. Send it to him. I think.
Very tasteful, Bob, as always.
Hey, I work at being tasteful, but you know what? A lot of great people said if you ain't got no boldness in you, ain't never gonna get nothing done. And I hear something going on back there that's giving us.
Yes,
Oh, it
something.
might be. It might be my computer. I've been adjusting the volume. I will stop
Okay.
doing that. I
Well,
will be
it's
good.
I
but
like that
anyway.
it's loud when you adjust the volume. That's appropriate.
Well, we got to do it, and it's a B Cube Sunday morning, and I'll just catch
It
people
is.
up. I just sent artwork to Karen and Deborah um, Reinhardt Godfrey on alternative leadership. Deborah worked about 2 years ago. Deborah put together a great little book on leadership, and it has set getting overwhelmed by every possible book coming along. And finally, we said, "Look, Deb, we're going to get this puppy out." And so they're reviewing the artwork. Deborah's Pertner finished up with all of the edits. Contracts have been signed by all but three people, and we will sure miss them, guys. Um, if they don't. So we're making the progress, and I am getting the final uploads done this weekend, I hope, for Scott's Planet, because we had a minor issue. Um,
I thought those were the ones who didn't go to the minor colony.
well, what happened is I delayed it a little bit because somebody said, you might want to change the order.
Oh, that was a different thing. I said that you might want to delay it a little so the reviewers had time to read the arts.
Um, oh, I must have missed that. Of course, I tend to ignore you, Cliff.
Yeah, I know that. It's part of your charm. It's part of your country charm, Bob.
Oh, but I gotta say, it's a fun world. No, the the best thing we can say right now is we live in a country with full blown freedom of speech, freedom of expression, where the executive branch understands that the most important thing they can do is uh, is to help America prosper and not enrich themselves. Right? The I'll tell this little one, and then I'm going to defer to you all. I don't know how true it is, but I read a little note about Smothers Brothers. Now I like the
I
Smothers
love
Brothers.
those guys.
Yeah, I'm so old, that I can remember them actually.
Well, they did make a comeback when I was young.
Oh
They got off the blacklist and were back on TV.
yeah, the Blacklist. They're not
The
calling.
blacklist might be a good place to start. At both in the more general cultural context, the 1950s, which I remember. I'm, as you can see, old enough. um, and how those principles play out in speculative fiction literature, because everything from Star Wars on, we love those scenarios where there's a big bad villain who is either taken over everything or is threatening to take over everything, and we love stories of resistance, rebellion, and taking our planet, republic, nation back. So we could
Yeah,
play.
we could start with that. I want to give Bob a chance to finish whatever he was going to say about the Smothers Brothers, and then
Oh,
we
okay,
will
yeah.
dive in. No worries.
But let's, yeah. So
Oh
now it's in context.
Go,
yeah,
Bob.
it was simply put that they wrote a letter, according to this one source. Um, oh great, I am sorry. They I just glanced over the news item.
Don't do
The
that.
mother's brothers just had sent a letter apologizing to Johnson, because they were pretty tough on him. And he basically sent him back a letter and says, "Hey, I'm the president. It's my job to have people make fun of me, mock me. And if I ever start doing anything to discourage it, then I'm not the president of America. I mean, that's not what America's about." And I just thought that was a pretty cool example.
That
But no,
is.
truly, I didn't live through the blacklisting days, and I'd very much love to hear what Deborah has to say about that. So I'm going to shut up and listen.
All right. So, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Deborah. Uh, uh, Deborah is, first of all, I want to say thank you, Liam, for saying you're looking forward to my insights. I'm looking forward to Deborah's insights. She's our guest, she's a returning guest. She's an author and editor, and recently TikToker. Um, and she is the editor of the Lace and Blade series, a number of Darkover anthologies. She co-edited at least one Sword and Sorceress anthology, and the author of the Lambda finalist novel Collaborators and other novels such as Jadium and the Laren Gambit, which I believe she's going to talk about because it is unfortunately relevant to real life these days. And a number of other novels, including a wonderful epic fantasy trilogy. What's the overall trilogy name?
The Seven Petals.
Seven Petal Shield. Yeah, Seven Petal Shield trilogy. Look for it. It's well worth seeking and reading. All right, so Deborah, you wanted to talk about McCarthyism and the blacklist.
Well, I will talk about it from a very personal standpoint. So I was born in 1947, and some of my earliest international political memories are of Russian tanks rolling into Hungary. So that's sort of the beginning of that.
That was 1956, right?
So already my family was talking about stuff like that. My parents were very active in progressive politics during the 1930s, during the Depression. And starting about 1942, they became targets, subjects of investigations. That 1942 is about the time that the FBI started surveilling my family, according to the documents I got through FOIA. And
that's the Freedom of Information Act.
Freedom of Information Act. I wanted to know what records they had, exactly what they had been doing to particularly my father, who was a union organizer and very vocal in standing up for workers' rights.
Was your dad a literal socialist or just
He was a literal communist during the 30s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That didn't last. But his very vocal defense of workers' rights did not. In fact, I still have a copy of it. It's the proceedings, I think, of the International Communist Party from 1939 or so, and it's got his speech in it, and he is haranguing them about the importance of labor unions. So, but he was staunchly patriotic and tried to enlist in the army, in the military for World War II, and they didn't want him because of his eyesight, not because of his politics. Anyway, not only was the FBI surveilling us, but the Justice Department under Dean Rusk brought a denaturalization suit to take away his citizenship.
Holy moly.
Yes.
Now, was your dad an immigrant who had been naturalized? Or?
Yes. He was born in Zhytomyr near Kyiv.
Okay.
And immigrated in 1922, which, You may remember it was 2 years before the U.S. imposed strict quotas on Jewish immigrants. So he and his brother were very lucky
Yeah,
to
to get
get
out
in
when they
there.
could. Yeah, that was.
And he was a pogrom survivor, and told stories, not very often, but he wrote it in his notes, of that he was born in '07, and there was a lot of turmoil, social turmoil between the revolution and World War I, of soldiers, or on one occasion, and Cossacks on another occasion, coming into the village, lining up all the little Jewish boys and shooting them. And it was like one miracle after another that that he survived. And then the village was destroyed, and he and his mother and brother spent 2 years on the road, going from one relative's house to another. So, that's he had the experience of social upheaval and violence as a child. And what it did was it radicalized him to support the rights and welfare of working people and the poor, the
That's
vulnerable.
so wonderful
You
that he
know,
came out of that, horrific experience as a radicalized for love.
yes, yes. He was a very politically passionate person, but also a very loving person. Um, anyway, people in the 1950s, and these are like personal memories, people um, were frightened who they could talk to. You never knew if a neighbor or a family member would basically squeal on you, and you might disappear or get, hauled into a committee and end up in prison. People committed suicide. People lost their jobs, they lost their relationships. It was a very fearful time, and a lot of people were terrified to speak out. People would go underground, which meant, we talk about going off the grid. And so they would basically work for cash and spend only cash. So they didn't have bank accounts. There was no paper record of them, and they would stay at safe houses. They would go, and we had a safe house, our house. And I remember a couple of incidents. I was really too young to understand just how important it was that nobody knew that so and so was staying at our house. But I have those memories and that atmosphere of fear. And I still wrestle with it in terms of being publicly vocal. That, let me tell you, that is almost completely gone. But and
Good for
a
you.
big chunk of it went away when I protested the Vietnam War. But and now it's like I'm so old and so cranky that I am much less afraid of what could be done to me personally. But I remember that time, and I remember. So I went to Reed College in Portland, and one of my teachers was an amazing calligraphy teacher named Lloyd Reynolds, who basically pioneered the calligraphy movement on the West Coast. And I remember stories, I didn't hear them until I was in college, of him being hauled into a HUAC
That's the House
meeting. And
Un-American Activities Committee for you youngins out there.
yes, and refusing to give them any names, refusing to give them anything other than his name. Basically, I won't tell you.
Good on him.
Yeah, there were truly heroic people that spoke out. Just as now we're seeing universities pressured to change their policies and to admit only certain students and to do this and that, and law firms and the press and
$100,000
this
H-1B visas. I
yeah,
read an
yeah,
article yesterday that a lot of medical, residents, interns and residents are H-1B people, and they make about $55K a year. So no hospital can afford $100K to bring them. So we may have a shortage of doctors very soon.
yes, yes. I never mind May. I think we will. So, so what's happening today is eerily reminiscent of what I grew up with. That era came to an end, and that gives me hope today because there were immensely courageous people. Everybody, Edward R. Murrow, who spoke out, and I'm blanking on her middle name, Margaret Chase. There's another name in that, who stood up against McCarthy, and eventually, I won't say the madness ran its course. The resistance got strong enough and powerful enough to take our country back from the McCarthy maniacs. And there were so many people who jumped on the McCarthy bandwagon for their own personal enrichment.
Of course. That sounds
Yep,
very
because
familiar. So let's
yes,
talk a little about your novel, The Laren Gambit.
yeah.
I believe you have
So
a copy.
I have a copy here, and it's marked, and I'm going to read you a scene. So I continued the Darkover series created by Marion Zimmer Bradley. I was invited to do so during the last year of her life, and she and I actually talked about the first three books, which were conceived as a trilogy, and Daw said, "Yes, we want more," and so I got contracts for another three books, and then another three books. So since they were three books at a time, I had to come up with proposals for three novels a long time before they came.
Can we pause for one moment and talk about
Mhm.
what is it? And we're gonna go right back to politics, but we're gonna talk about publishing right now. You've been given a
Yeah.
contract for three, or you have the option of submitting proposals for a 3-book contract, and you're doing basically work for hire. You're working in someone else's universe, right? And
Mhm.
so it's like
Right.
writing a Star Wars novel or a Star Trek novel or something along those lines, or an Alien versus Predator novel. Which, hey, publishers, I'm ready. Um,
Pay attention to
yeah,
this
right.
guy.
All of the ones who watch this podcast regularly. Anyway, so what's it like having to do that, especially 3 books at a time? How do you do that? How do you go about like figuring out how to sell a book on spec that's in someone else's universe?
Yeah. Well, it's not on
Okay,
spec.
so they contracted you,
It,
and then you had to come up with a. That's a really
yeah.
nice position to be
Well,
in.
it is. It is. It is. So the first actually it was like the first one, um, because Marion and I had talked about that plot and some of the characters and stuff like that, and then she died, and it turned out we shared an agent and a
That's very
publisher.
convenient.
So that yeah, different editors. I had been edited by Sheila
Okay.
Gilbert at Daw, but Betsy Walheim was the one who was in charge of the Darkover series.
Which
And
also, a historical note for
so
those who may not remember, that was a wildly popular series at its time and was
yeah,
hugely influential in feminist science fiction of its time. And
hmm
irrespective of
hmm
things that came out later, at the time, it was hugely popular and hugely influential.
right, and a number of her books. I think The Heritage of Hastur came out, I think it was 72. It might have been a couple of years later, but it was a pioneering book in terms of mainstream, sympathetic, heroic gay character. And
That's huge. In 72, that's like just 3 years after Stonewall. So,
yeah, Yeah, yeah. And then The Shattered Chain was an iconic feminist um, adventure.
And Cheryl loved it.
was
Anyway.
Yeah. So by the time this was like 1999, Dark River readership was falling off, but it was still uh, an exciting place with a big fan base. And anyway, so Betsy says, I know you, Deborah. We've published your work. I know you're a competent writer, but Darkover is a really important franchise, and I need to see what you can do with it before we will sign a contract. This was for the fall of Niskaya.
Okay.
So I sent her 100 pages. The writing was all mine. Although for continuity, I would use phrases that Marion liked, like his eyes glowed as if lit from within. It's like I would never say that myself, but my natural literary style was close enough to Marion's so that if I wove a couple of things like that in, it wasn't a big jarring change in authorial voice. And then Betsy calls me up and she says, "Are you sure Marion didn't write this?" It's wonderful.
That's a great compliment. So I'm going to quote the actor John Hurt, who talked about how his approach to acting, that he tried to find the tone of the piece and blend his performance with that. So that's how he was able to do diverse things like Alien and the Elephant Man and Spaceballs, right? Like he would find the tone of the piece, and he wouldn't make it about him. He would try to blend so that for the film to be a successful film. So it sounds like you're doing the literary equivalent. You're finding the tone of the piece, which is in this case the tone of Darkover.
Right. Right. And it wasn't that big a stretch for me. Although, as I said, I would, grab little bits and pieces that Marion had written. And the interesting thing is that as it went on, the first 3 books were very close. It was close to Marion's tone as I could get without distorting my own voice. And then things kind of got more Deborahized, so that by the time we get to Thunderlord, which was supposed to be, which is a sequel to Storm Queen, I mean, my description of that book is Jane Austen on Darkover, because for me, it was all about the relationship between the sisters, and people either loved it or hated it because of that.
It is a truth universally acknowledged when the Hasters take over a tower, but
not quite, yeah. But yes, exactly. Yeah, and how they change, and and that is the primary relationship, even though there are romances on both sides. So
that brings us to the Laren Gambit.
Yeah, that brings us to the so it was the last 3 books: Children of Kings, Laren Gambit, and Erlyn. So I needed to turn in proposals for all 3 of them before Children of Kings came out. And I can't even remember when that was, but it was a while ago. So I'm sitting there thinking, a lot of stuff has been done to death. I want to do something a little bit new. And one of the things that I had to deal with was that in the years before Marion's death, those last 3 books, Exile's Song, Shadow, Matrix, and Traitor's Son, were basically written by Adrienne Martine Barnes, whose style was quite different from Marion's, and who killed off Marion's favorite character, which did not, a lot of people were really upset about that, including Marion. So at the end of Traitor's Son, all relations between Darkover and the Terran Empire were severed. And the whole concept of Darkover from the beginning was the clash of cultures between a technological and star spanning empire and a low technology world where psychic abilities are prized. And all of the different, Marion went off like Storm Queen, for instance, takes place way, way, way before there's recontact.
At
But
the
that
age
was
of
the
chaos,
original.
I think, right?
Yes.
I read Hawk.
So but if you look at the early books, that's what it's about. And so I wanted to bring the Terrans and the Darkovers back in contact. And how can I do that in an interesting way? And what popped into my mind, the importance of and the uniqueness of the telepathic powers that some Darkovans have, how their system of ethics has evolved to not use it to control other people. That's a fundamental principle. Well, what if you had machines that would allow you to control somebody else's thoughts and speech and behavior? The situation with the rupture with the Terran Empire was that there was a horrible dictator, which was Adrian's creation, which was marvelous. And what if I brought those into conflict? What if the Terran Empire or Federation, whatever it is at that point in time, has been taken over by a power mad dictator who has gotten his hands on technology that will allow him to do this, at first individuals and then groups of people? And the rebels appeal to Darkover to help them to stand against this. That was my idea.
So there's a little bit of kinship to the Mule in the Foundation trilogy in this, except in Foundation there wasn't so much of an organized resistance. There were, right, because he took over the empire from within the empire, and there was no independent other than the Foundation, right? There wasn't an independent civilization like on Dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you have individuals. And one of the things that I wove into this is that it doesn't matter if the government is benevolent and democratic and egalitarian or horribly despotic, somebody is going to be protesting it. I mean, if we got the world's best president and the world's most fair Congress and justice system, somebody would be protesting it. There's always going to be, and that's yeast. It makes things juicy. It gets dialogue, assuming it's nonviolent. But so anyway, I think this would have been about, 2012, 2014, right in there before Trump's first term. I needed to write 3 proposals. And so I wrote up a proposal for Laird Gambit. And for one reason or another, it did not get published for a long time after that. I'm just refreshing my memory as to what the copyright date is here. It is 2022. Which meant that I was finishing the last draft about a year before that.
So we're now past Trump and into Biden at that
point. Yeah. It's still a good story.
Oh yeah.
And we had every reason to think that Trump was finished.
Bullet in a world, yes.
Yeah. So I if you will indulge me, I would like to read a little bit of what I wrote then. I'm
not only will I indulge you, I insist.
Yeah, yeah. So my character is named Bryn Hasland. She's a child psychologist. I had a lot of fun with a protagonist with a from the healing profession, and actually her skills in dealing with highly traumatized children, because this dictator's been fomenting wars on many planets, and there are a lot of casualties who are still alive, but deeply traumatized. Um, and her father is the senator who's been standing up to the dictator, and his mind has been taken over. So she's off on a quest to, first of all, find where he's been sequestered, rescue him, and deprogram him. But so she's on this other planet, and having wasted more time than she'd intended, Bryn realized it was time to get going for her rendezvous with Felicity Sage, who was her mentor. She's on she's gone to her university on a different planet. She deleted her search history from the Access, gathered up her coat, and headed for the university coffee shop. Along the way, she passed a stand that offered news flimsies and screen displays where pedestrians could stand and view the feeds. As she approached, her gaze was captured by a headline that Space Force ships had made orbit around Vainwall. A story from later that same day focused on planet-wide martial law. There had been riots on Rennie and several other worlds, and with footage of protesters being loaded into police vans. Her spine stiffened as new video images flickered across the screen. The first few moments were chillingly familiar. A demonstration in a mall or plaza, numbering in the thousands. She didn't recognize the place, but the architecture in the background looked typical for a medium-sized city on any of a dozen Alliance worlds. Nausea washed over her, and with flashes of memory, she tasted the gas at the back of her throat. This was Alpha, she told herself sternly, the most civilized of environments, but she did not feel safe and wondered if she ever would again. On the screen, the crowd had fallen still. All at once, or so it seemed, raised fists lowered, signs dropped to the ground, movement ceased. The people, as far as she could tell, just stood there. They gave no sign of paying any attention to one another. They barely seemed to be breathing. Bryn had never seen anything like it outside a horror vid. Then, without any visible signal, the people began emptying the plaza. Individuals, participants, staring blankly ahead as they shuffled along. Below the image, the newscaster's commentary scrolled across the screen. Following orders to disperse peacefully, the citizenry of Rennie City return to their normal, productive lives. What the hell? Someone behind Bryn muttered. A group of pedestrians had gathered to watch the newscast. In their faces, she saw the reflection of her own consternation. They all decided to give up and go home? A young blonde woman murmured to her companion. She was clearly a student by her satchel, covered with irreverent patches. What? Another viewer said from near the back of the group. Just because someone in authority asked them nicely? Well, I know you wouldn't be so meek. How is this possible? The young woman's friend said. All of them at the same time? It isn't possible, Bryn replied. And then she thinks groups can be dispersed by various methods, some more coercive than others, but none of these methods work for everybody at the same time. There should be a mix of compliance and resistance. Some people would withdraw, but they would talk about why they were leaving, what happened, whether the demonstration was successful, even where they were going to have dinner, something. Not this mute, unquestioning obedience. I don't believe it, said an older man in a professor's quintessential tweed and shaggy gray hair. The footage must surely be a hoax. Whose side are you on anyway? One of the students demanded. Attacks on the free press are the hallmark of an emerging totalitarian state. That's hardly the point, the young woman said. Consider the objective of publicizing such an event, whether real or fabricated. Clearly, it's to discourage dissent by advocating, by example, the peaceful dissolution of protest assemblies, her friend answered. The two of them went off, debating the matter in an animated fashion. The professorial type had faded into the stream of foot traffic. Bryn glanced back at the screen. While she and the other viewers had been talking, the crowd on the plaza had thinned noticeably. Still, there was almost no noise. She searched for police presence in the scene, and after a few moments, found it. They were clustered around a platform several meters tall that was surmounted by an apparatus. It didn't look like either surveillance or sound projection equipment, although she could not think what else it might be. The matte, unreflective black box-like structure bristled with antennas. The devices remained in Bryn's memory, menacing and enigmatic, as she hurried to her rendezvous. So I must have been writing this about 2014, 2015, right in there.
When it was science fiction.
It was science fiction. It's like, and I think that how I depicted that, and also Bryn's utter distress when her father's mind is taken over, were informed by my own memories of the 1950s and how people were coerced into silence or compliance, and why it is so horrific to see things like universities being silenced and comedians being taken off the air, because poking fun at dictators is one of our most powerful freedoms of speech. Yeah. So as far as I know, we don't have this machinery, although if you have a conversation with a staunch MAGA, we might as well. Actually, what just popped into my mind was Trump supporters are like, don't bother me with facts, and the left tends to, we don't shoot people with guns. We talk them to death. We bury them in data, in scientific studies, and
they'll just wish they were shot with a gun.
Yeah, right. Well, we write stories about it. Yeah. So at the protest yesterday, we had decided that instead of sort of general, bring a sign of whatever you're protesting, and it's like 2 million different causes, although there are usually between, 15, 25 of us, it's a very small protest. But we decided to focus on Prop 50. And for viewers who are not in California, you may remember in recent news that Trump asked Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, to find him 5 more congressional seats, because he's terrified of what might happen if the Democrats take Congress next year. And all the polls show a blue tsunami for Congress. And so Abbott, good little psychopath that he is, and the Texas legislature are going to redistrict. They're going to gerrymander the congressional districts.
Which was already fairly gerrymandered.
Yes, to create 5 more Republican safe or leaning seats, and Missouri, and I think there's another state that's gonna do it also. So California is said, well, why don't we do that and wipe out their gains? But instead of the legislature just deciding to do it on not on a year that we redistrict, in California, we have a measure on the November ballot so the voters can decide if they want to do this temporarily. So A, it's voter approved, and B, it will, those new maps will go away and in a few years. So it's important in terms of a truly fair congressional election next year that this measure pass. So we're holding our signs and talking about it. And this, just a little ways from where I'm standing, this lady, I hear this lady practically screaming, "No, I don't want it. I don't want 50." And then the protesters there, this is how you do things right. Scream curses at each other. Yeah, I took her, just started talking to her in a friendly way. And at the end, they had given her, we had a fact sheet that we were handing out, and she was actually took one and was reading it. Yeah, yeah, right. Um, it's interesting that I think I think protests are more successful when there are a lot of women, especially women in charge, because I've seen too many incidents in our town. Almost all of the people that are driving by wave at us and honk at us and give us a thumbs up or a peace sign or something like that. At the beginning of so I started participating in these in May when I didn't know the protests were happening. So I organized one for May Day, grabbed some
As
from
one
friends and
does.
made some signs. And yes, and unfortunately, one of the people that came was a man who was inexperienced at protests. I mean, way back to Vietnam. Anyway, so somebody drives by and says "F you," and and gives them the finger. And he ran out into the street screaming at this guy, and it's like, no, 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 no. This is dangerous, because once you get that degree of adrenaline involved, and testosterone fueled adrenaline, and you're out in the street and with a person who A is driving a deadly weapon, B could have a gun in his car. This is not how we want things to go. So fortunately, I was nearby and I was able to talk him down. It lasted for about 10 minutes. Over the month and the demonstrations, we have all noticed that there are far fewer people who are behaving in a negative manner toward us. And one of the women has started, somebody will. It, I think it's usually once a demonstration, and and somebody will, say something rude, and she'll say, "God bless you."
Bless your heart,
Okay, yeah.
as they said in
Okay.
Tennessee when I.
Yeah, I think it's better not to respond at all. Don't feed that monster. Just get out there with your presence, determined, nonviolent, um, yeah, and with a sense of humor. And I will shut up for a while now after sharing with you my favorite sign. I stood next to the lady who has it. She has this big yellow sign, and there are 3 lines: OMG, GOP, WTF. And I think it's wonderful. And yeah, Anyway, it's an all-purpose
protest
sign. Yeah, right.
We have a little comment from Baba Baba Shaggy Baba. Hello, Baba Baba. We had a guy a couple of weekends ago that was screaming out of his car window at protesters and then did not notice the light had changed, veered off to the right, hit a light pole, and totaled his car. That must have been awkward. Like, because then he's like stuck right by the protesters while the tow trucker.
Well, I hope that somebody went over to make sure he was okay and render first aid if he was not.
Although it sounds like he wasn't okay to begin with. But anyway, that's just mentally. So let's talk a little bit about science fiction because and publishing, because we are in an era where media is being suppressed, mass media, in this case television, right? Late night hosts, two of them already are being suppressed, Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert. And we had kids in the car. Ow! I hope everyone was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It says no one was hurt. That's good. We have what science fiction always had, two advantages in the published written science fiction. The first advantage is that the enemy does not read. Right. Well, the enemy of freedom does not read. They don't read books. It's their whatever. I mean, they want to burn books and ban books, but only the ones that they are told, are about whatever it is they want to ban. And then science fiction can be a metaphor, can be a funhouse mirror of the present, and you can write something like the Laren Gambit. And it can come out, even if it came out now during the, Trump administration, second Trump administration, they wouldn't notice, right? Like, it would be not. It's twice under the radar, right? So first of all, it's a book.
Yeah. That's
a picture book. They like banning picture books because they can get through those. And then also it's not literal, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like satire is literal in the sense that the target is obvious, right? And if you're targeting Trump, you can either, and you're doing satire like a late night talk show, you either talk directly about him or you use some obvious, metaphor like the Orange Dictator or something like that, where everyone knows you're talking directly about the specific individual. But if you have a planet with a dictator, that can be very different, right?
Yeah, although I would point out that two books that will almost always appear on banned books lists are 1984 and what was the other one that I was
thinking? Brave New World, or
it could be Brave New World. There's another one. At first I was thinking of Jack London's The Iron Heel. But,
yeah.
There are books like that are, you could argue that 1984 is science fiction. It's a dystopic. It was a dystopic future when it was published. Right. And the forces of oppression really are unhappy about people reading it. Oh, Fahrenheit 451.
Which is interesting because Ray Bradbury was not liberal. And in the backstory of Fahrenheit 451, it was anti-free speech liberals had taken over the country, and they were the ones. That's the official in-universe explanation, which is kind of, it's science fiction, right? It doesn't have to be believable.
Yeah, but what people remember about the book is the book banning.
Of course.
And the resistance movement, and because that maps so well over what happens when right-wingers get in charge.
Well, you remember when they were burning Beatles records, I'm sure.
Actually, I don't.
Really? Because that happened when John Lennon said we're more popular than Jesus now, and all of a sudden Christians around America were burning Beatles records.
the more fools they could now sell
Hey,
their
boosted
seconds
sales,
for fortune.
Yeah, you have to buy them before you burn them. So,
Yeah.
but really, you wouldn't want to be around a bonfire of like cardboard and vinyl. That's kind of like
Ooh.
burning plastic, But
But if you look, I want to circle back to, Star Wars. So you have, the evil emperor who looks if he were fat, he would look kind of like, somebody his image should be expunged from our memories. And then you have the valiant resistance. And it could exist, and I'm just not aware of it, of MAGA saying, no, our kids must never see these movies. We must never talk about that. Is that happening?
So I have a cousin, one of many, most of my cousins are Democrats, but I've got one of my Wisconsin branch cousins' family. That family is staunch MAGA Republicans. And I remember, and I'm still, I'm connected. He's family, right? So, right. And my attitude toward relatives and like high school friends who have gone MAGA is I'm not going to let that guy separate me from my friends. Other people's attitude is like, well, cut them out of your life because they're supporting evil. I'm like, okay, yeah, they are, but I'm not going to let that son of a bitch separate me from the people I love. So, and that's my personal decision. But he posted after seeing one of the sequel trilogy that came out from Disney a few years ago. Oh, yeah. He posted his version. He went to see it, and he did a kind of a pseudo-fictional post about Donald Trump as the resistance fighting the evil empire of the Democrats, because that's how he saw the metaphor. Literally, like completely missing the point, but consistently, right? Like, because he saw through the Trumpist filter and wrote this whole thing where like Donald Trump is the freedom fighter, the little guy fighting the system, and so yeah, I mean that's I think probably what they do, right? Like that, because he got a lot of likes from his MAGA friends and in agreement and all this and that. I think that's completely consistent with the filters. It's heavy filters.
Yeah.
So doesn't it just bounces right off them. Funny that I wasn't sure I was going to. I saw a documentary last night. That about Leni Riefenstahl, and the scenes in Star Wars were actually some of them inspired by Triumph des Villains, and not the ones Triumph of the Will, not the ones you might think, like the final award ceremony where Chewbacca famously doesn't get a medal, yeah. And Han Solo and Luke Skywalker get a medal. The way the Rebel soldiers were arranged and the shots and all that was taken from Triumph of the Will. Oh. I mean, he was explicitly referencing fascist imagery, but using it for the rebels, which is kind of interesting, kind of a mixed message. Yeah. I saw on YouTube somebody had taken that scene and stripped out the very excellent John Williams music and just showed you the scene without music, and it's really creepy. You could have this effect, I guess, by watching the movie and turning the sound down, but it was just like, oh yeah. Anyway, you could hear like the sound of the footsteps and stuff like that as turn direction to face the front and this and that. But yeah. So
yeah. So one of my takeaways from that is that we are all the heroes of our own story.
Yes.
Gosh, somebody was talking about. I think it was in terms of fiction and different characters that in well-written fiction, each character is the hero of their own story. And so you never have two characters experiencing the same event in the same way. And, those ridiculous CGI images of, Trump as Superman or as, whatever, that.
I love the Gavin Newsom's office parodies of those images.
Yeah, right, right. So I think the Trump supporters, the ultra magas, are always going to interpret heroic popular stories, whether they're films or whatever medium, in terms of their own ideology. Of course they are, because they are the heroes, and Trump is their savior, or
And also, Trump is literally an underdog for them, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right, which is hard for the rest of us to fathom, but is very much like, and not to draw a too direct comparison, but like Hitler wrote Mein Kampf because he wanted to be seen as the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's his like underdog memoir.
Right. And I don't think it's possible to create a story of rebellion, of resistance, and of taking back Planet City, whatever we take back, in such a way that they cannot rewrite it and misinterpret it, or interpret it in terms of their own values and their own viewpoint. But I think, and it's just like arguing with somebody who is a devoted Trump acolyte. You are never going to change their mind. It doesn't matter how many facts and how many moving stories, human stories, you present to them. They're fixed. But what we have to remember is that they are a small minority, and that there's an increasing number of people who don't like what's happening, who are looking for an alternative, and who, if you don't box them in a corner, if you give them some space to change their mind without feeling like they were totally deluded, and they're horrible human beings and stuff like that, that those people are persuadable, and I think there's a huge number in the middle that are in that category, and those are the people that can be influenced by stories, especially in popular media.
Stories are very important, right? They're the fundamental human lens of seeing the universe.
Mm-hmm.
We see everything in terms of story, from sitting around the campfire 100,000 years ago to watching an IMAX film or reading a book, right? So we are coming up against the hour. And I would like to again thank our wonderful guest, Deborah J. Ross, who has returned to discuss these very important things with us. Deborah, are there particular, like I would recommend Seven Petal Shield and collaborators, and of your stuff set in your own universes? Are there also, like, for example, do you feel like a reader who has never read Darkover would enjoy, like, Laren Gambit, would be able to follow along and stuff? Or
Laren Gambit, and also Erilyn, which is the last Darkover novel, which has very strong anti-war and anti-suppression of women themes in it. Both of those are excellent entry points. Also, the very first one I did, the Fall of Mescaia, is very accessible to readers who are not familiar with the world.
so it's possible to read your 9 Darkover books, and that be your experience of Darkover.
Yeah, right.
Excellent.
And thank you also for plugging collaborators. I just want to say that it's an occupation and resistance novel that was inspired by the time that I lived in Lille, France, which was the center of the French resistance to the Nazi occupation. And it's the occupiers are Terrans who are basically marooned there because their ship is broken, and the native race is gender fluid. So I wanted to talk about power, and in order to talk about power, you have to talk about gender.
Which is why it was a
Um,
finalist for the Lambda Literary Award.
Yeah, really. The model is more Vietnam than McCarthy era. That with the best of intentions, because the Terrans do not understand how the native race works, not just cultural but biology. They make one mistake after another, and then there's pushback, and then because they're desperate to fix their ship, they not only impose Terran values and attitudes about power and gender, but they get increasingly violent. And it's about how that happens with people with goodwill on both sides and evil will on both sides. People that collaborate because it's to their benefit. They exploit the situation, which is what happened in France.
Well,
And how you get off that cycle and deal with the wreckage
that's
of
the.
what happened.
I very much appreciate that point because I can tell you what. When we get off of the current cycle we're in politically, there will be wreckage to deal with. Uh, I mean, how will you ever restore the budget to social programs that took 40 years to build uh, with when you have an entire half of the country that is like, hey, we don't want to, we like it the way it is. I mean, they didn't like a few things, but it's just going to be hard, really hard to rebuild all this. And I would love to see you come back, Deborah. Grab another guest who's got your vigor towards protest and energy to get to help us turn this back because we're coming in, uh, as you pointed out, that there's a lot of resistance out there to the redistricting efforts to counter.
Mhm.
I put a post out there online on it that we got a whole bunch of people that are like, well, what if I'm an incumbent? I might lose my seat if we do all of this. And I made a rude comment. I said, open your bottom drawer of your bureau, pull out your MAGA hat, put it on, and stop pretending that you're not MAGA if you're more worried about your seat in Congress than the country. Because we got to worry about the country. We got to save our country. And so I look forward to having you back with somebody that is equally active in doing what you've been doing. Um,
Would love to
Yep,
do it.
I will. Historical note: we have had Deborah on before on my week, and so folks can find that on YouTube or on Facebook of those videos.
yeah, that's a good thing. And now I wanted to remind the world that we have got we put out a new call. It's not really a new call. It's one we've been contemplating for a while. And that is whether we're doing a sequel to Alternative Liberties. Now, those of you who pay attention may know that when we started Alternative Liberties, we originally entitled it Retribution and Revenge. And then we said to ourselves, no, we can't write a book entitled, about the upcoming the Trump administration and everything resulting from that election. Retribution and revenge is too negative. My God, now I realize it was too positive. So
Yeah, really mild.
very mild. So the call is out. It's up on the BQ Press project page, and It's also on Moksha. And here's the thing: I only have 3 rules for what I'm rejecting. One, I will not see the problem solved with um, uh,
Assassination.
assassination. Thank you. And I
Hmm.
don't want to see any graphic sex. Um, and if you send me a PDF, I'll send it back unread uh, because I don't, you know, if you don't send in something that can't be edited. So now that that is out there until about mid-November, December. We're still working on it. Jeff Sturgeon is our artist, and Karen and myself will be editing it. We'll probably Deborah Godfrey in there. But the key thing is, I don't want mild. I want us to. I'm not interested in publishing 60,000 words of hate speech, but I want honest to God stories about how bad this man can make it, uh, and how bad he has made it. And it doesn't have to be Donald Trump. We've had allegorical tales, we've had essays, we've had good poetry. Um, but that book is coming out, and we're going to release it February 12th in Richland, Washington, where we had the pleasure of building the Nagasaki bomb. Joy, joy, something to be so proud of.
Mhm.
But we just, honest to God, guys, resistance is not futile. Resistance is survival right now. And I beg all of you to keep resisting, stand up. And something I told somebody the other day, um, if you stand by silently when somebody on in conversation with you starts spouting um, dog whistle crap, Charlie Kirk crap, you know, the kind of stuff that they spout, and you say nothing because you don't want to bother somebody, you don't want to make a scene, then you are making a scene. You're making the scene that says, I am silently tolerating you. Okay? You know, I'm not saying you stand up and walk across the restaurant floor to slap some MAGA hat off somebody's head.
But you're
But
not saying that, right?
yeah, but if they are engaging you in a conversation where that is the tone of the conversation and you don't call bullshit, then you're in the mix with them. Yank out your MAGA hat and stop pretending. Uh, Silence is tolerance. So that said, any last words there, Deborah?
Yeah, I've got a TikTok channel where I talk about stuff like this. It's Deborah J. Ross. Please come find me. I yesterday I did it was like a minute 40 seconds on free speech, and I want to remind everybody, really following on what Bob just said, that the only person who can shut you up is you. So don't let that happen, and be loud, be kind, be diplomatic, but be loud. You have a voice, use it.
Amen. Thank you, Deborah. That's
Yep.
probably the best way to put it. Or as Jim Wright says, get off your frickin' ass and vote. Or, and speaking of that, they're coming up. We got Jim Wright and David Gerald coming up next week. And so, hey, I, you know, on occasion, Deborah, one of those two will have a
Conflict.
conflict. I like the idea that I got your email hanging around uh, in case that happens, because I could enjoy seeing you and Jim and David, or you and one of the two. It would be a contest to see who can get the first word in.
Actually, David Gerald and I are are good friends. We go way, way back. And I'd love to be on a program with
Well, I
him.
take.
And I am one of the few people that has gotten David Brin to shut up. So if you can get him on, I'd love to talk to him too.
Oh, we have him.
I still win the baby picture contest with him, though.
Okay, that one we got to hear about. I have him on once a month. It's but as it goes, they're a slotted thing. I just every now and then
It's
one
fun.
of them can't, and I want to be able to bring in somebody that will shares their. I talk about somebody who shares your vigor, somebody that shares their vigor, their perspective, in a way that puts a great spin on it. And I'm going to shut up now and let you guys go. But thanks for coming.
Thank you, wonderful audience. Lovely comments. I didn't have a chance to comment on all the comments, but there was some really good discussion in today's broadcast.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you so much.